our literature, in our non-scientific literature, in the spirit of prophecy, but now we're starting to see evidence once again in the scientific literature that if our mind is continually on negative thoughts and negative things, this can lead to illnesses which become real. Okay, so focusing on the unreal can eventually bring us diseases that are real. This hypothesis includes an explanation for how psychological stress can influence systemic diseases. We've known this for a long time. We've known that people who have heart attacks and are depressed have a much poorer prognosis for their heart failure than people who are not depressed, for instance. And this inflammasome may actually be the mediator that bridges that, or at least one of those molecules that bridges that. So this is something that I think is very important. Is there a way that we can somehow interrupt this? In fact, the studies are showing that inflammasome pathology has been linked to several autoimmune diseases such as type 1, type 2 diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and even vitiligo. Again, the compelling link between physical activity and the body's defense systems. This is out of the Journal of Sport and Health Science. What we're now going to transition to is we've made this connection between the mind and the body about depression and systemic illnesses. And now what we're going to see is, can we interrupt that cycle with physical activity? So there have been a myriad of well-designed scientific research that has connected activity and exercise with well-being, not only mentally, but physically. And here is just a list of well-designed randomized controlled trials. And let's just go over these here. This was a study that was published looking at 36 mildly obese sedentary women, aged 34 years of age on average. They randomized them to 15 weeks of moderate intensity exercise, about 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week, walking program or observational control. What did they find? Fewer days with illness symptoms reported in the walkers versus the controls. Here's 91 obese women randomized to 12 weeks. Again, moderate. They found fewer days of illness symptoms in the walkers versus the controls. Here's 115 postmenopausal women randomized to a year of moderate intensity exercise. Illness incidence dropped 30% in the exercise. Illness incidence was 30% in exercise versus 48 in the controls. And there was a threefold decreased risk of illness in the exercise group versus the control in the final 3 months. Okay, so that was a huge amount. So the incidence of illness in the exercise was 30%, and it was 48% in the control. So over that period of time, 30% of those over that 12 months came down with illness versus 50 or close to 50%. Here's another one looking at males and females, 363 subjects here, 8-week moderate intensity. Illness, 14% reduction in illness, 23% reduction in days of illness, and a 31% reduction in global severity compared to control. So if you are an employer, it would seem as though it would be best to make sure that your employees are getting regular exercise, not only for their health, but also for productivity. And that's because of a phenomenon here that we see here called the J curve. Now, this is important to understand, and actually it's going to be sort of the revolving philosophy that we have during this period that we're going to talk today. This is the J curve. Okay, so the J curve is this understanding, and it's this relationship that as you get off the couch and start to do a little bit more work, like walking, maybe even working in your garden, perhaps doing maybe a short stint of jogging, nothing that would get you on a commercial on television, nothing that would get you on social media. What happens here is that your incidence, and in this case, the graph has upper respiratory tract infections, but you could substitute just about any bad thing that you can think of there. You notice that there is a reduction. And there's a reduction because a mild to moderate amount of exercise immediately becomes beneficial over the static state of you sitting on the couch. Okay. However, there comes a point where increasing exercise starts to erase or delete that benefit. And the reason is because increased exercise workloads increase inflammation and cytokines, and that can cause an increase. And so we may think that when we look on television and we see Olympic athletes doing amazing things and breaking records, that they are the healthiest, humans on the planet. Nothing further from the truth. These are actually, in some cases, the most diseased and the most susceptible to illness. And we've actually known this for a long time. The degree to which athletes have to leverage their body to be able to get 1/100th of a second off the timer puts their body under so much stress that they are actually under increased risk for infections. And so when I say exercise, I want to be very clear to people that what we're about to talk about here is exercise that is mild to moderate is the most beneficial in terms of making you more and more healthy. And so I don't want you to think that in order for you to be healthy in terms of exercise and being fit is going to require you to do the things that you see on television. The things that I'm asking you to do are very simple, easy, reachable things that everyone should be able to do. And we're going to go over some special circumstances to make sure that everyone believes that exercise is something that you can accomplish. So let's go through the data here. Let's compare moderate exercise versus heavy exertion. And I'm going to make the case here that moderate is better. Okay. Why? Because it mobilizes natural killer cells. These are things that eat up bad things. It mobilizes CD8 positive T highly cytotoxic lymphocytes to eat up things. Stress hormones remain moderate and not high. And over this time, there's an enhanced immunosurveillance and it lowers inflammation. It's particularly of benefit on obese and diseased individuals. And it can be an immune system enhancer. It enhances antibody response. And there's evidence of summation effect over time, moderating tumorigenesis, atherosclerosis, and other disease processes. Now, compare all of those good things to heavy exertion. Here you have immune dysfunction, inflammation, oxidative stress, muscle damage, natural killer cells, neutrophils, T and B function, and many other measurements are altered for hours to days after prolonged extensive exercise. Let's go through here and look at the delayed type hypersensitivity response, the salivary IgA, T cell function, natural killer activity, macrophage function, granulocytes, oxidative burst, the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, cytokines, and stress hormones. In a marathon race, notice that all of these good things become reduced and all of these bad things become severely inflamed. That's in a marathon race. What about a walking bout? And when I say a walking bout, that's about a 30 to 45 minute walk. Okay, something you might want to do maybe on a Sabbath afternoon. Go outside, get some fresh air, get some sunshine, walk in the woods, maybe get some of those phytosides that are coming off the trees, the pine trees, to enhance your immune system. Notice that something like that is going to mildly increase some of these immune functions and just mildly increase some of these cytokines. So that to the point is that a walking bout is actually more healthy for your immune system than a marathon race. And, I love to include some of these things here. As I was talking about, these are the athletes. Of course, I need to include the Canadian national hockey team because I am Canadian. And of course, for many, hockey is a religion. It's not my religion, but anyhow, I make some light points there. These are the people that are the most susceptible to getting illness. And that's the thing that they can absolutely not afford. If they are trying to get a gold medal, they need to be the healthiest that they can. So you can imagine that there's been a lot of research and a lot of money poured in by governments to figure out what it is that they can do to keep their athletes as healthy as possible. And it's, of course, evidence-based, right? Because every country wants their athlete to get the medal. So they want to know what the truth is. They want to know what they can do because they're going to have to push high, and they're going to have to deal with this inflammatory condition that increases the likelihood of resistance. So let's go to the literature. Here is an article that was published looking at the most important guidelines for elite athletes to keep their immune systems robust and illness rates low despite physiological stress that's experienced. Okay, so this is based on a number of articles here. So let's go over these real quickly. That you should develop a detailed individualized training and competition plan that also provides for sufficient recovery. What sort of things? Sleep, nutrition, hydration. Those are taken right out, by the way, right out of Ellen White's pillars of health. Sleep, nutrition, and water. It's all right there. And psychological strategies. Can we say trust? Maybe that's a psychological strategy. Use small increments when changing the training load. Okay, you don't want to overexert. Develop a competition event calendar that's based on the health of the athlete. In other words, your body needs rest. You need to spread things out. Do I hear the Sabbath there? That's rest. Monitor for early signs and symptoms of overreaching, overtraining, and illness. This makes sense. This is common sense. Avoid intensive training when ill or experiencing early signs and symptoms of illness. Participate in ongoing illness surveillance systems by sport agencies. And this list goes on and on. Minimize pathogen exposure, limit hand-to-face contact, follow other hygienic practices. They even mention vaccines because obviously these competitions occur all over the world and you're being exposed to pathogens that you're not used to seeing, and you might need to have protection against those. Follow strategies that facilitate regular, high-quality sleep. Avoid excessive alcohol intake. Let me rephrase that. Temperance. Okay. And consume a well-balanced diet. Now listen to this. Okay. You'll hear all sorts of things. You'll hear all sorts of things about meat being what we have developed over millions of years to eat, and how the human body has evolved to eat meat. You hear all these sorts of things. When it comes down to getting your athletes to the finish line first, it's interesting to me that politics, that holding on to cherished philosophies, all of those things fall by the wayside, because all you want to know to get your athlete to the finish line is the bottom line and the research and the data. And when it comes to that, this is what the recommendation is. Consume a well-balanced diet with sufficient energy to maintain a healthy weight, with a focus on what? Meat? Protein? No, grains, fruits, and vegetables to provide sufficient carbohydrate and what? Polyphenols that reduce exercise-induced inflammation and improve viral protection. There's no messing around. If you want to get serious, you need to, if you know you're serious here, it's because the countries want to get their athletes to the finish line. They want to get the gold medal haul, and they're going to be giving them the best information, and it's right here. It's interesting. Follow stress management techniques that decrease the extraneous load of life hassles and stresses. I would again say that's T at the end of that. Develop coping strategies that minimize internalized impact of negative life events and emotions. Again, the T, that's the trust at the end of New Start. And periodically monitor psychological stresses using available instruments. So folks, you can do all of the things that the latest research is telling us to use in athletes that are overstressed because they have a specific goal to reach. But the good news is that you can employ all of those preventative strategies and not even be in that situation by exercising moderately and getting the benefits of all of that. So you've got New Start, and they're leveraging the E on exercise to the point of everything else. They have to make sure they're hitting every stroke on all of those other letters. And that's exactly what we've just went through. This is not a document from the church. This is not a document from Ellen White. This is the state-of-the-art medical science for keeping athletes under stress healthy. Again, and it's because of this J curve. Here you are right here. And here you are after you get up off your couch and you start walking around. Things are only going to get better if you start to put one foot in front of the other and start to exercise. I guarantee you that. You're also going to see improvements in obesity. CRP is going to go down. IL-6 is going to go down. It's an improvement. They say obesity induces a constant state of low-grade inflammation characterized by activation and infiltration of pro-inflammatory immune cells, such as macrophages and granulocytes, and dysregulated product of acute phase proteins, reactive oxygen species, metalloproteases, oxalipins, adipokines, and pro-inflammatory cytokines. This is all an inflammatory state. How do you reduce that immediately? Getting off the couch, starting to walk, starting to do things out in nature. I think this is a really interesting and telling slide. And that is that there's a phenomenon after you exercise. There is a pro-inflammatory state that occurs. One of the things that they find that reduces this is a post-exercise carbohydrate load, usually with water and a banana. But they find here that by doing this, it attenuates post-exercise inflammation by about 30 to 40%. So this is something that I would highly recommend doing. We've talked about when is the best time of day to eat. It's usually in the morning. That's when your insulin is the most sensitive. And so if you start the day with exercise in the morning, by the way, that's been shown to be very beneficial for getting good sleep at night. Not exercising in the evening, although that's better than not exercising at all. The best time to exercise is actually in the morning, and then following up with some carbohydrates when your insulin is the most sensitive. I think that's perfect. Guess what all these fruits and vegetables that the science is showing that you ought to be using if you want to be an elite athlete? It has polyphenols. Polyphenols are substances that pass through the small intestine unabsorbed and then reach the colon. So polyphenols are food for your bacteria. Now, why would you want to be feeding the bacteria in your colon? Well, because you want bacteria in your colon, and specifically, you want the right bacteria in your colon, because the right bacteria in your colon can make your life so much easier in terms of the substances that they give off. If you have the wrong bacteria in your colon, it can make your life miserable because it can lead to disease. So they're starting to find out that there are actually more bacteria, or maybe slightly more bacteria in terms of cells in your colon than there are cells in your entire body. So this is almost like another organ that we haven't even taken account of. It's called the gut microflora. And when you eat fruits and vegetables that have polyphenols in it, these polyphenols are feeding the good bacteria in your gut. Also, fiber. Fiber is a very good, nutritious source of food for the bacteria. Fiber is made up of beta-1,4 linkages of carbohydrates that cannot be broken down by the human body, but they can be broken down by good bacteria in your colon. Those are allowed to grow, to feed, and they give off substances that are beneficial to us in our body. The biotransformed gut-derived phenolics circulate through the body, exerting a variety of bioactive effects that are important to athletes, including anti-inflammatory, antiviral, antioxidative, and immune cell signaling effects. So doesn't that look wonderful there? Look at that spread of fruits and vegetables. Look at the color. All of those are because of polyphenols. So we talk about stress, anxiety, fear, all of those things. And I think the recipe for all of this, in part, is all of the New Start, but exercise specifically. Let's look at some studies to see if that actually is the case. So getting back to Jennifer Heiss, who is the professor there at McMaster in Ontario, Canada, she works at a university, and as such, there are students that are there for terms. And of course, the most stressful time is the last 6 weeks of the term, right? This is when students have to study. Their whole life is on the line, making sure that they can do well on exams. Well, she did a study where she took 61 university students for 6 weeks. She divided them into 3 different groups. One group where there was no exercise, one where there was moderate continuous training 3 times a week, 6 weeks, 20 minutes a day, heart rate up to about 142. And then there was the high intensity training group that she had 6 weeks, 3 times a week, but a higher intensity up to 174 beats per minute on the heart rate and a higher Borg RPE scale, okay, higher amount of watts, almost double in terms of energy production. And the question is, she wanted to find out is, what did this training exercise do to their stress level, to cytokines in their body, and maybe perceived stress and depression. Now, before we go on, which group, the no exercise, the moderate continuous training, or the high intensity training, based on what we've talked about before, which one do you think had the better outcome, had the best outcome?
The moderate group.
There you go. I heard a voice. Thank you. Let's see if that is true. All right, so here's the results. Let's look at depression, and this is a validated Beck depression inventory. This is a validated scale of depression. Let me show you, first of all, what's really important. So they did a baseline at the beginning of the 6 weeks and then at the end. Look how much the group that did not exercise, look how much their depression increased. This is in just 6 weeks of having that type of thing looming over you with final exams and all of this sort of thing. There is a tremendous risk for depression. And it's not understated here that what we've gone through in the last 3 years could put anybody into depression and perhaps even suicidality. So it's not to be lost there that that's a pretty significant increase. However, as was mentioned here, look in the moderate intensity exercise. They were actually less depressed at the end of the 6 weeks than they were when they began. This shows the incredible efficacy and power that moderate intensity exercise could do to somebody with depression. And this is why I think it's so important. Now, notice that strenuous exercise did have an impact on depression. It ameliorated it, but not to the same degree. And we'll come back to that. Let's look at anxiety. We see a similar pattern here, except actually the high intensity group had slightly more anxiety at the end than they did at the beginning. I don't know if that was statistically significant, but numerically it was. But again, anxiety reduced, and statistically significantly so, in the moderate intensity exercise group. Now let's look at perceived stress. If you were to ask them, are you under a lot of stress? They would tell you, those in the high intensity group, they're actually under more stress than the ones that did no exercise at all. That's pretty interesting. And of course, the moderate intensity group was able to maintain their benefits. All right, this is a depression inventory and depression, anxiety, and perceived stress on that scale. Let's go to something more objective. Let's look at cytokines. Look at tumor necrosis factor alpha. That is an important cytokine that is involved in infection, but it's something that you don't want chronically elevated because it can lead to unneeded inflammation. Notice what happened. Statistically significant reduction only in the moderate intensity exercise group, not in the high intensity exercise group. And then when we look at IL-6, IL-6, by the way, is the target for what we use in cytokine storm in COVID-19. IL-6 is a bad actor that increases dramatically in cytokine storm and can cause the pneumonia associated with COVID-19. And so a lot of medications are actually targeting IL-6 in these patients to bring it down. So bringing it down is a good thing. Interestingly, in those that did not exercise, there was a reduction. In those that did moderate exercise, there was numerically even more of a reduction, but not statistically significantly different. However, in the high intensity exercise group, there was actually an increase in IL-6. And we alluded to this earlier with that J-curve data that we were talking about. High intensity exercise is going to increase those cytokines. All right. So, so we looked at those three. Let's see what Jennifer has to say about this, Dr. Heiss, about this, the conclusion of her study. She says, a critical question we sought to address was whether different physical exercise programs that prevent the development of these depressive symptoms could also reduce pro-inflammatory cytokines. Indeed, we found support for this from 6 weeks of moderate intensity continuous exercise, which resulted in less depression, lower levels of tumor necrosis factor alpha. And they say that this may be that moderate intensity exercise may be working through the process of reducing tumor necrosis factor alpha, although it's not sure, right? So you've got reduced depression, less anxiety, lower cytokines with moderate intensity versus high intensity. And certainly it's better than no exercise at all. Let's look at some other studies. This was published in 2016 in the Journal of Affective Disorders. And just exercise alone versus medication. So if we do exercise versus medication on this scale, let's start here with exercise versus medication. There is a minimal benefit to doing exercise versus medication. There is a more benefit of doing exercise versus psychological treatments. There is an even bigger benefit of doing exercise versus usual care. And if you're not going to take any medications for your depression, it seems as though there's a very large magnitude of intervention of exercise versus no intervention at all. And this has to do with the Hedges G, which is a statistical measurement of magnitude of effect. And it seems to show that exercise is about as effective as medication when it comes to treating depression. And by the way, exercise works immediately, whereas a lot of these medications, I'm not saying you shouldn't try medications. Sometimes medications has a role, especially in very severe depression. But these medications usually take weeks to kick in. The standard published time is 4 to 6 weeks. So exercise is great. Now, let's put it together with what we were talking about before. Fresh air. We've talked about the benefits of sunlight. Imagine if you were to combine all of these three treatments at the same time by going outside, doing some work in your garden. Exercise can improve mood almost immediately. Exercise can also help you lose weight. It causes your blood to circulate. It has almost no side effects. It allows you to get the sunlight that you're getting, and it gives you a sense of accomplishment that you've done something. Again, this J curve I think is important. Here you are right here on the couch. What we need to do is get you off the couch. All right, let's finish up here, wrap up with some very specific prescriptions about what you ought to be doing. So pre-age children, 3 to 5 years of age, what should they be doing? They should be basically active throughout the day, and it should be diverse things. You don't really need to get them in a very rigorous exercise program. Look, we all know this, right? School-age kids, 3 to 5, they find their own exercise. They're very inquisitive. They run around, they play games. They're getting plenty of exercise. All right, what about children's and adolescents? So these are school-age kids. What we recommend is 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise every day. And that's really what is necessary. That's what physical education teaches. There should be about 3 times a week should have aerobic muscle strengthening and bone strengthening. I remember when I was in junior high, we used to go to the weight room a couple times a week. I hated it because I was the skinny, lanky guy that couldn't bench press more than 60 or 70 pounds. But we did it. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do to improve bone strength in the body. But 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise a day, I think is fine in children and adolescents. They're not at risk for getting a lot of these chronic diseases at the upper end of that J curve. All right, what about adults? So adults, it's important to move. Notice here, we're going to get a little bit, move the bar a little bit lower here. Move and sit less during the day. I think this is really important. A lot of our jobs are sitting at a desk. I think some things that have become improved in there is they have desks where you stand, and you can stand and sit and move around. These are things that I think that are really important. There was a study that was done recently that they said that sitting at a desk is almost as dangerous as smoking a cigarette, and for cardiovascular disease. So any kind of activity is beneficial. Things in your mind that you should start to do to move off that J curve. Instead of taking the elevator, take the stairs. Instead of waiting 5 minutes for the closest parking spot, park anywhere in the parking lot and walk. I like to park my car, by the way, as far away as possible where there's not a lot of cars, because people have the tendency to open their cars and hit yours. So it's nice not to get those dings. Plus you get some exercise. But 150 to 300 minutes per week, which is about 20 to 40 minutes a day, that's the kind of exercise that we as adults should be getting. and then maybe some muscle strengthening for about 2 days per week. So if you can think about that, getting outside and doing some gainful work in your backyard, planting a garden. This is also going to help, by the way, in getting that sunlight that you're supposed to be getting as well. What about older adults? Same for adults. Balance training, might need to make adjustments. 150, for older adults, it's the same for adult plus balance training because you could fall and need to make adjustments. Hold on one second. Someone's texting me here. Okay. Women during pregnancy, they need about 150 minutes per week, about 20 minutes per day. There's no need to reduce a prior routine. When my wife was pregnant, she ran a mile a day on her first pregnancy. And unfortunately, our firstborn came about a day early. So she stopped doing that because she wanted to keep those kids in as long as possible. But I still say that, and the recommendations are that if you have a routine, there's no need to stop that. So you want to remain active, but consult with your obstetrician. And then adults with chronic health conditions or disabilities, again, 150 to 300 minutes per week. That's about 20 to 40 minutes a day. Muscle strengthening about 2 times per week. And again, consult with a physician. And with that, I will stop there and open it up for any questions. We've got about 10 minutes of questions, or maybe 15.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schwartz. Wow, quite the J curve. Yeah, quite a lot of new information. Actually, I've been upscaling my exercise regimen recently. 2 weeks ago, I for the first time, I ran a 15-kilometer. And I'm like, oh, looks like I'm getting on the other side of the extreme now. You might
be. So you need to employ those procedures to make sure that you don't become ill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Now we'll start with a question from Lorraine. If you've got questions, just raise your hand, and then you're going to get the floor. So Lorraine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seheult. It was very interesting. I just want to find out about weight-bearing exercises for older women, because I think it increases their bone density, and then they have less chance of fractures, etc. And also the comment about the J curve. We have a gym instructor who was a bodybuilding champion, and now she's sitting with a lot of problems. She's had to have back surgery and recently neck surgery, and as a result of the pain, taking painkillers that cause stomach problems, and had to have treatment for that. So so it just shows you that excessive exercise is definitely not beneficial. Thanks.
Excellent points. I thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, so I have a mother-in-law who's older, and she is having, and there's diverse issues when you get older. Some people have problems with their balance, in which core exercise and balance exercise may be good. Some people have issues in their joints because of arthritis. They might need to have joint strengthening. And some people have issues with just muscle strengthening and how to do that. And there's various different ways of going about it. If you have access to a pool, that's a great way to be able to exercise if you're concerned about falling. If you want to strengthen your knees, doing a stationary bicycle is a good way of strengthening the muscles of the knee without necessarily putting a lot of impact on the joints themselves, so that you can strengthen that. But as you say, yeah, the weight-bearing weight is going to stimulate the bone. The bone is something called piezoelectric, which means that as pressure is placed on it, it generates an electrical current. And so the more stress you put on the bones, the more those bones are going to strengthen. That's something that we found out when we sent people out into space. They came back very different. Unfortunately, they had to do a lot of rehabilitation when they came back from space for an extended period of time because they lost that pressure that was being put on the bones. Thank you, Lorraine. That was important.
Any other questions? So, Jibs, so now I'll put you on the spot. Do you have a question? I see Mercy. Mercy has got has raised a hand. Yeah, Mercy, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Doctor, for the presentation once again. And yeah, I think I missed out something. After exercise, you spoke about taking banana and something for carbohydrates.
Yeah. Water. So just simple. What they were recommending in the article is water and maybe a banana. So it's basically it's a light carbohydrate charge that they seem to show reduces the inflammation immediately after exercise. So it might be a way of ameliorating or mitigating those high stressful workouts and the stress that comes afterwards. So maybe blessings after you do a 15K, have someone at the finish line with a banana and a glass of water that you can mitigate that inflammation. But that's what they're recommending.
Okay, yeah, because actually I have a problem with my knee. I don't know if it's a muscle or something. If I walk for 20 minutes or so and I come back, then I feel like my knee or a muscle on the knee somewhere there, it becomes painful. And I was like, okay, so if I'm supposed to take banana and water, then maybe it's something that I've not been doing.
Well, yeah, that could be something more local on that knee. So the inflammation that we're talking about is probably more systemic inflammation. But if you have an issue with the knee like arthritis, that could certainly cause the pain that you're having in your knee. It'd be hard to tell without examining it. If someone were to move the knee without you trying to move it, and there was pain, what we call pain on passive flexion, that might indicate that you've got some arthritis, osteoarthritis perhaps, especially if it's on just one side, or if there is pain. If there isn't pain, then it could be muscular, right? So or something with that nature, maybe a muscle strain. It's hard to tell exactly just by the history. One thing that's really good for osteoarthritis is any fruit that ends in the word berry. So blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. A cup full of blueberries a day can dramatically reduce the effects of osteoarthritis. There's been some studies on that, so I would highly encourage that.
Okay, and the other question, thank you. The other question I wanted to find out is about fruits and vegetables when you are taking them. Is there a sequence or you can take them randomly?
Yeah, this is an area that I don't have a lot of information on, except from what I've been told and what I have read, that vegetables and fruit should be eaten separately. And I believe it may have to do with digestion and fermentation of the sugars in the fruit. But I'd have to do more research on that. I can only tell you what I have been told, but I have no independent knowledge or explanation for that.
Because I was going to ask about at what interval, then if I'm taking them separately.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that usually it takes about an hour or two for the stomach to clear its contents. So if that is the issue, then that would be the time necessary for that to happen. Yeah.
But then remember, you are talking about the spike of sugar level and the insulin being reduced, being released. If I'm supposed to eat twice a day or once a day, and then I separate these things, am I not going to have more hours eating, for my pancreas to release that insulin and the spike of sugar level because of the way I'm eating?
So you could have fruit for breakfast and vegetables for lunch. I think that's one way of doing it.
Okay.
You could exercise in the morning. I'm not saying that this is the way it has to be, but you could exercise in the morning and then have a early and then have a later breakfast, which allows you more time for intermittent fasting throughout the night. Have a breakfast with fruit, which is sugar, and then have a early afternoon lunch, which has vegetables instead. And you can get your polyphenols that way and satisfy everything there.
Okay. All right.
It's hard to do though. It's easy to say on paper, but life is life, right? We have to work on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. You're
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Doc.
You're welcome.
Do we have any more questions? I know even from the previous 3 lessons, today is the last one. So Dr. Shah, I wanted to ask that we've been, reading and hearing about this high intensity interval training, HIIT. How does that fall in the moderate? Because my understanding is that, if you're doing high intensity interval training, then that's pretty much intensive.
I think short bursts of high intensity training is appropriate. It may be these half marathons and marathons that might be causing excessive inflammation. It's not uncommon for people to die after running a marathon.
Okay.
In fact, I think the first person who ever ran a marathon did die, according to the Greek story, right?
Right. So high intensity interval training one can regard that as sort of moderate.
Yeah, if we do high intensity training, but we do it for a short burst, I think, if you're looking for muscle strengthening or things of that nature, everything in moderation. Everything in moderation is, I think, the key goal here, that when we start to do things to an excess, we start to leverage the other aspects of our health. And so it depends on, what our goals are and what are we after.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If there are no more questions, then we will draw this to a close. So on behalf of the entire Mowbray SDA Church and from different churches that have been represented or represented by people that attended the seminar, I would like to thank you, Dr. Swart, for accepting the online invite to spare your time and be with us. I know it was very difficult for you, considering the different time zones that we're in, for you to accommodate us evening time, which would be like morning time for you. This has been quite a big blessing to us. I've learned quite a lot from these seminars, quite a lot of new information. It's been quite helpful. I'm sure everyone all the people that have been attending regularly can relate the same. May God bless you, and may you continue doing all this ministry that you are. And then to all the people that have been attending, Dr. Swart has got, actually I knew him through his YouTube channel, MedCram. He shares a lot of videos there. Of course, most of that is pretty much like medical education, but they also quite a lot of things that lay people can actually quite understand. Even the medical education, he explains in sort of like simplified way with diagrams that even a lay person can understand and learn more about medicine, about our bodies and about our health. Feel free to check it out. It's MedCram on YouTube. And then also just for the people that have been attending, we at Mowbray, we're going to have an evangelistic campaign running from the 8th to 21st of October. Please feel free to join. It's going to be on Zoom, but it's going to be live as well. So feel free to share the information, invite friends to come and enjoy the blessing. We're going to have a pastor coming from Zimbabwe who is going to facilitate the meetings. Yeah, otherwise, wishing everyone a happy Sabbath. Take the shot. Happy Sabbath well in advance. And greetings to your family. Do you have any last words that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I thank you so much for this invite. It actually wasn't too bad. It was at 9 o'clock in the morning our time, so no problem at all. And I enjoy talking about this stuff. It's my passion. My other passion, of course, is talking about the gospel as well. And even though that's not on my MedCram channel, I do have a number of videos out there that talks about the Bible and end time events and what we're getting ready for and what we're seeing. If you're interested at all to look at those, there are a number of videos posted on Weimar University's YouTube channel. So if you were to go to YouTube and type in my last name and Weimar, you'll see those videos come up as well. And those are videos that were recorded about 2 years ago for a week of prayer that I did up at Weimar University. Are you familiar with Weimar University?
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, I watched some of those sermons on Weimar, and yes. I've also listened to some of your audio sermons on Audioverse.
Oh, okay, so you're familiar.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar. Yeah. Any other channel that we can find the sermons apart from Weimar and? I've seen audios on Audioverse.
Yeah, Audioverse is also a very good repository of those sermons as well, as it is for just about everything. So
yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we'll keep in touch. Hopefully maybe one of the days we could organize an online end time prophecy seminar.
Very good.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye. Happy Sabbath, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Blessings.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sweat. This was very interesting.
Thank you, Lorraine. I appreciate your comment in the chat too.
Pleasure. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.